Now the opposition says, show me how much we have in the reserves before I decide whether I support your budget and tax plans. Let's have a look at the money. Basically, they're asking, I have something in the bank already. How much of that can I touch? This was not the attitude of our forefathers, the founders who were building for the future, but the attitude of inheritors who think they have come into a fortune and want to consume the fruits of their predecessors' labors.
When we talk about the reserves, we're not talking about raiding them. It's about slowing the growth slope of the reserves. So the principle is not touched. And there's nothing unusual about this, because the PAP do it too. How so? In 2016, this House, including members of the Workers' Party, we agreed to include Temasek in the NIRC formula. Does that not reduce the growth of the reserves? It does. So the argument cannot be that when the opposition tries to put that proposal forward, somehow we are engaging in some sort of chicanery to steal what previous generations have toiled and perspired over to bring us here. Now, we've asked for numbers. I believe in the last term, DPM Hing said, no, this is a secret weapon. You don't reveal these numbers. But this House, this platform provides us the opportunity to do so, if not in session, in committee. And yes, there is parliamentary privilege, but I'm pretty sure if it makes sense, I'm prepared to give up my parliamentary privilege if I divulge those numbers, and then I'll be taken to task under the OSA. So why are we doing this? We're doing it precisely because we're looking for alternatives to better consider the welfare of Singaporeans.
Now, as Finance Minister, I can tell you that I felt so grateful to our founders for that founders' mindset in leaving us with these reserves, that my team and I were able to focus fully on what would best serve the interests of Singaporeans. I didn't have to worry about what terms would I have to negotiate with lenders and how we are going to pay for it. Why are we able to do that? I think there's a certain mindset that we owe something, not just to ourselves, but to our future generations. And therefore, I hope that Mr. Singh will bear that in mind in looking at this.
So if you think the government is doing the wrong thing in terms of MPs' offices, in terms of the MPs and the community centres, by all means vote the government out, put a new government in, change the government, change the policy. But if you say vote against the government because somebody else will look after getting the PAP government and you just become a free rider, and you vote opposition, no harm, the PAP will still be there, then I think the system must fail. Because the system can only work if people vote sincerely, honestly, in accordance with what they really want, and to produce a result which matches their true intentions.
I don't think the residents in Aljunied, Hougang for 30 years now, and even Sengkang, as a result of the results of the last election, would appreciate being called free riders. We're not just doing nothing, having been voted in. We're not just letting the other guy, the government of the day, do something. The voters of these constituencies put their faith in us because they know an opposition in Parliament is ultimately good for Singapore. But it's when you have elected opposition MPs that the government listens harder, and that means something to people. That's my view.
If you stand and you tell people, vote for me, I will be a better MP than the other one, than the PAP MP, I think that's entirely reasonable. But if you say, vote for me, somebody else will vote for the PAP, and therefore the PAP will be the government. That the economists will call a free rider. It means that you're taking advantage of somebody else who's doing the duty of electing a government for the nation, and you're not doing your part, expressing your true views and preference as a voter, whom you want to be the next government. And if everybody takes that attitude, then you're going to end up with a government which you don't want.
The government at the moment controls 90%, over 90% of the seats. So as a result, there's a very comfortable margin. So because of that margin, you can't prevent the voters from thinking that actually there's a margin of error I can afford. So as a result, I can have the best of both worlds, a strong government and a strong opposition voice in Parliament. Let's try.
Mr. Lee Kuan Yew, our first Prime Minister himself, says this, and I quote, "At the end of the day, if you're running the system properly, you must have a distinction between what is the party, what is the government. So if you're voted out of office, the machinery is there for the next party to take over." Sir, Mr. Speaker, sir, when my colleagues and I joined the opposition cause, we didn't have heady dreams of becoming government. It's certainly not me. Why did I do this? I believe in an opposition, in a parliamentary democracy. It's not going to happen with people just hoping someone else does it. Somebody has to put his flag in the sand and say, I'm going to do it. And then it's the duty of myself, my party colleagues, to make sure that the people who are on board do their very best.
Can we continue to get good people into politics, to maintain the quality of our ministers and MPs, and make things happen for Singapore, if more and more citizens prefer the PAP to form the government and yet vote for another party's candidates to be their MPs, for diversity, for checks and balance? At what point does a vote for a strong opposition become a vote for a different government? So to say that the system is such that with civil servants and SAF and so on, therefore it doesn't matter who is the government, I think that's not being honest. In that case, we can dismiss all the ministers. They can go on leave. You don't need ministers. Anybody can be a minister. But you need to run a system which is finely tuned and capable. You need a very capable hand at the top. The ministers are not just presiding. The ministers are executive. They are running the ministries. They are expected to know all about the ministries, every in and out of the policy. That's how we have done COVID-19. That's how the ministerial task force has operated. Long discussions, all views heard. Finally, the ministers must decide, and quite from time to time, the staff did not recommend the circuit breaker. We discussed it in cabinet. Cabinet decides. It's a big decision, $5 billion of a supplementary budget. Civil servants, unelected, can make this, can carry this. New government come in, can know how to do this, and have that feel and that trust and that confidence of Singaporeans, as well as the officials, as well as investors and everybody else watching us. Anybody can make it happen. I think that's not in this world.
I'll have to do what is good and what is right by Singapore. Looking for the best people. Do I want to contest all the seats, more seats, slowly grow? A lot of it turns on the quality of people that come and are attracted by the Workers' Party and our platform. If Singaporeans are attracted to it, then sure, there's a prospect of growth, but it's not growth for growth's sake. I'm not desperate for power, Prime Minister. But we've got to get good people if we want to bring this country forward. The PAP have been doing that, as the Prime Minister has alluded. At this point in our growth, I think we have to grow our roots as a loyal opposition. After more than 50 years of independence, this is the first time the government has recognized the office of the leader of the opposition. We have many, many more miles to go. But we're not chasing a destination. We intend to do right by Singapore.